This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're talking about something that exposes a fundamental flaw in how modern women approach relationships. I see this pattern constantly, this comment that keeps appearing. Do you think we're the side characters then? I am not going to be in the background. Sounds powerful, doesn't it? Sounds like a woman standing up for herself, refusing to be diminished. Women read that and feel validated. But let me translate what she's actually saying. In terms that reveal the absurdity, she'd rather be the star of Waterworld than the CO star of Jurassic Park. For those who don't know, Waterworld was one of the biggest box office disasters in Hollywood history. Jurassic Park won 3 Academy Awards, became the highest-grossing film ever made at the time, and became a cultural phenomenon. The co-stars of Jurassic Park, Sam Neill and Jeff Goldblum, had legendary careers partially built on that film. Meanwhile, Waterworld is remembered as a punchline, a movie that nearly sank a studio. That's the choice she's making. She'd rather lead a disaster than contribute to something great if it means someone else is the lead. She's so obsessed with not being in the background that she'll destroy the entire production just to ensure she's center stage. This is female logic, and it's not logic at all. It's ego masquerading as self-respect. Here's what actually happens when women operate from this framework. They find a capable man, a man with potential, with vision, with the capacity to build something significant, and instead of recognizing they've found someone worth supporting, someone whose success will benefit the entire family, they immediately start competing with him. Not consciously, maybe. Most women don't wake up thinking, how can I undermine my husband today? But the ego underneath drives the behavior. She can't let him lead because that would make her the follower. She can't support his vision fully because that would make her vision secondary. She can't build him up because that might make him more important than her. So she tears him down, subtly, constantly, systematically. She questions his decisions. She second-guesses his leadership. She dismisses his opinions. She makes sure everyone knows her contributions are just as important, more important even. She turns everything into a competition where there should be collaboration. The result? Her strengths get used to tear him down instead of building the family up. Her weaknesses hold them both back because he's spending his energy managing her ego instead of leading the family forward. The relationship becomes a constant power struggle instead of a partnership moving toward shared goals. Meanwhile, the smart women, the ones who actually understand how relationships work, they operate completely differently. They find a capable man who loves them, and they make a strategic decision. I'm going to support and amplify his strengths while covering his weaknesses. That way, the couple can move most effectively toward their mutual goals as a unified team, rather than as competitors fighting for individual glory. This creates several powerful outcomes. First, his strengths get maximized instead of undermined. He becomes better, more effective, more successful because he has a partner actively supporting him rather than actively competing with him. Second, his weaknesses get covered by her strengths instead of exposed and criticized. Where he struggles, she steps in, not to prove she's better, but to ensure the family succeeds. Third, and this is critical, there's no resentment building, no wasted energy fighting each other, no constant negotiation over who's more important or who gets credit. The energy that other couples burn fighting each other gets redirected toward actually building something together. When you explain it this way, it's completely reasonable and logical that a woman should be supportive and follow her husband's leadership. It's not about superiority or inferiority. It's about effectiveness. It's about structuring the relationship in the way that produces the best outcomes for everyone involved. But since we're talking about women, it's rarely that straightforward. Many women resist this structure because their egos feel threatened. They've been programmed to believe that following means losing themselves, that supporting means becoming invisible, that submitting means becoming a slave. These are the useless hills they've chosen to let their relationships die on. They'd rather destroy the marriage fighting to prove they're equal or superior than build something great by accepting their role in a structure that actually works. Why is this so easy for men to understand but so difficult for women? Maybe because men are more likely to have played team sports, where the best teams have players who make winning more important than their individual stats. They understand their role as a chance to help the team win, not to get personal glory. They've seen losing teams with arrogant superstars who cause major distractions just to get attention. The guy who cares more about his points than the team's record. The player who undermines the coach because he thinks he should be calling plays. Those teams lose, consistently, because individual ego destroyed team effectiveness. Men who've played sports understand instinctively you don't compete with your own teammates. You complement them. You support their strengths and cover their weaknesses because that's how teams win. It's not complicated. It's just effective. Women who haven't learned this lesson, who've been programmed to see everything through the lens of individual achievement and personal validation, they bring that competitive mindset into their marriages, and it destroys everything. Let me give you real examples of how this plays out, because the pattern is consistent and devastating. Example 1, he wants to start a business. He has the vision, the plan, the drive to build something. This is his strength. This is where he can lead. Her role should be supporting that vision, helping where she's capable, managing the home front so he can focus on building. But her ego can't handle not being the star, so she starts questioning everything. Are you sure this is a good idea? What if it fails? Shouldn't we be more conservative? I don't think you've thought this through. She's not offering legitimate concerns. She's undermining his confidence because his success would highlight her lack of initiative. Or worse, she insists on being equally involved in decisions she doesn't understand. She demands equal say in business strategy when she has no experience or expertise, not because she has valuable input, but because she can't let him lead without feeling diminished. The business either fails or succeeds despite her interference. If it fails, she says, "I told you so." If it succeeds, she makes sure everyone knows her contributions were essential even though her primary contribution was not sabotaging him too badly. Example 2, he's good with money, strategic about investments, naturally thinks long-term financially. She's impulsive, emotional about spending, thinks short-term, the logical structure. He leads financially, she trusts his judgment, they build wealth together, but she can't handle him controlling the money, even though he's demonstrably better at it, even though every time she's managed finances they've struggled. Her ego demands equal control, so she fights him constantly on spending, makes financial decisions without consulting him, undermines the budget he's trying to maintain. 10 years later, they have no savings, significant debt, constant financial stress, all because she couldn't let him lead in his area of strength. Her ego was more important than their financial security. Example 3. He's trying to discipline the kids, establish structure, teach them responsibility. She's undermining him constantly, contradicting his decisions in front of the children, letting them off the hook when he sets consequences, telling them daddy's being too strict. She's not protecting the children, she's competing with him. She needs to be the good parent, which requires making him the bad parent. She can't let him lead the family because that would make her the follower. The result? Kids who don't respect either parent, who learn to manipulate mom against dad, who grow up without proper structure because mom's ego destroyed dad's ability to lead effectively. These aren't isolated cases. This is the standard pattern in modern marriages. The woman's refusal to accept her role in the structure creates dysfunction that damages everyone involved. And she'll never connect her behavior to the outcomes because that would require the accountability she's systematically avoiding. Now let's talk about the excuses women use to justify this destruction. Because they've got a whole arsenal of rationalizations that sound reasonable until you examine them honestly. I'm not going to lose myself. What you're actually saying is your ego is more important than your family's success. You're not losing yourself by supporting your husband. You're fulfilling your role in a structure designed to benefit everyone. But framing it as losing yourself makes resistance sound noble instead of selfish. I need to have a voice. You have a voice. Your husband should absolutely listen to your perspective and value your input. But having a voice doesn't mean having equal authority in every decision. It doesn't mean your opinion overrides his judgment in areas where he's more capable. You're confusing being heard with being in charge. This is just traditional gender roles that keep women oppressed. No, this is a structure that's worked for thousands of years across every successful civilization. It's not oppression, it's optimization. But calling it oppression lets you resist without having to defend why your alternative structure produces better outcomes. Spoiler, it doesn't. Marriage should be a partnership of equals. It is a partnership. But equal worth doesn't mean equal authority in every domain. The CEO and CFO of a company are both valuable, both essential. But they have different roles and different authority in different areas. That's not inequality, that's structure. Structure that actually works. I'm just as capable as he is. Maybe. In some areas, certainly. In other areas, probably not. And that's fine. He's probably not as capable as you in some areas either. The question isn't about equal capability overall. The question is, who's better suited to lead in this specific area? And are you secure enough to follow when the answer is him? I refuse to submit to anyone. Then you've already decided your ego matters more than your family's well-being. Because effective families require structure. Someone has to have final decision-making authority when you disagree. Either you accept that it's him, or you guarantee constant conflict as you fight for control. Here's what these excuses all have in common. They prioritize the woman's feelings over the family's functionality. They prioritize her ego over effective structure. They prioritize her need to feel important over the family's need to actually succeed. And here's the devastating part. The women most resistant to this structure are usually the ones who most need it. The women fighting hardest to maintain equal authority are usually the ones making the worst decisions. The women most convinced they can't let their husband lead are usually married to men who would lead them to much better outcomes if they'd just get out of the way. I see this constantly. A woman married to a financially successful, strategically minded man who would build significant wealth for the family. but she can't let him control the finances. So she spends impulsively, undermines his savings plans, makes emotional financial decisions that destroy wealth. 20 years later, they're struggling financially despite his high income, entirely because she refused to let him lead in the area he was actually good at. Or a woman married to a natural leader, a man who could develop strong, responsible, disciplined children, but she can't let him be the authority. So she undermines his discipline, contradicts his decisions, teaches the kids that dad's rules don't really matter. The kids grow up entitled, irresponsible, disrespectful. All because mom's ego was more important than proper child development. The pattern repeats endlessly. The husband has capabilities that could benefit the entire family. The wife's ego can't handle him exercising those capabilities without her equal involvement or approval. So she undermines, questions, resists, and sabotages. The family suffers, and she blames him for not being a better leader, completely oblivious to the fact that she's been destroying his ability to lead for years. So what can actually be done to address this? Because most women won't change until the cost of not changing becomes unbearable. Here's the framework that might penetrate the ego defenses. First, have a relationship structure overview. How is this family actually structured? Not how you wish it was structured, or how you think it should be structured based on modern egalitarian fantasy. How is it actually structured right now? Who makes the final decisions? Who leads in different areas? Who follows? Be brutally honest about the current state. Second, how is your family performing? Not how do you feel about the relationship. How is it actually performing? Are you building wealth or struggling financially? Are your children respectful and developing well, or are they struggling? Is your husband thriving, or is he withdrawn and defeated? Are you moving toward your goals or treading water? Measure outcomes, not feelings. Third, if the family is not structured in God's order, with the husband as head and the wife as supporter, why not? What are the actual reasons you've rejected that structure? Are they legitimate concerns based on his incapability? Or are they ego protection mechanisms where you can't handle not being in charge? Be honest here. Is he actually incapable of leading, or are you just uncomfortable following? Does he actually make terrible decisions, or do you just disagree with decisions that would actually work if you supported them instead of undermining them? Is the problem his leadership or your resistance to being led? Fourth, once you identify the root cause, have an honest conversation about what needs to be corrected so the family structure matches the design that actually works. This means examining whether you're the problem, whether your ego is destroying your family's potential, whether your refusal to follow is creating the exact dysfunction you complain about. This conversation will be uncomfortable. Your ego will scream at you to defend yourself, to justify your resistance, to prove that you're right and he's wrong. That discomfort is the signal that you're finally addressing the real issue instead of the surface symptoms. Fifth, make a concrete decision about structure going forward. Are you willing to let him lead in his areas of strength? Are you willing to trust his judgment even when you disagree? Are you willing to support his decisions instead of undermining them? Are you willing to prioritize family success over personal ego? If the answer is no, if you're unwilling to accept this structure, then be honest about that too. Stop pretending you want a successful marriage while actively sabotaging the structure that would create one. Stop blaming him for not leading effectively while you're destroying his ability to lead. Either commit to the structure that works or admit you value your ego more than your family. Here's the reality that most women don't want to face. The marriages that actually thrive, the families that actually succeed, the relationships that actually work long term, they have this structure. The husband leads in his areas of strength. The wife supports and follows, not because she's inferior, but because that structure produces superior outcomes for everyone. The wife isn't in the background, she's essential, she's valued. Her contributions matter tremendously, but she's not competing with her husband for the lead role. She's complementing him, she's making him better, she's covering his weaknesses while he maximizes his strengths. Together, they're far more effective than either would be alone. But that requires humility. It requires security. It requires being more committed to family success than to personal validation, and most modern women simply aren't there. They've been programmed to see submission as weakness, to view following as losing, to treat any structure where they're not in charge as oppression. So they destroy their own families, protecting their egos. They turn their marriages into constant power struggles. They undermine the men who could lead them to success. And they end up divorced and bitter, convinced it was all his fault, completely unable to see that they rejected the structure that would have saved them. If you're a man dealing with a wife like this, understand something. You can't make her accept her role. You can't logic her into humility. You can't convince her that the family's success matters more than her ego. She has to choose that herself. And most won't. What you can do is stop enabling the dysfunction, or stop accepting her undermining your leadership. Stop tolerating her competing with you instead of complimenting you. Stop pretending the structure doesn't matter when it clearly does. Lead anyway. Make the decisions that need to be made. Set the direction that needs to be set. And let her choose whether she'll follow or continue fighting. Some women will eventually choose to follow when they see that you're serious about leading. Others will choose to leave rather than submit. Either outcome is better than years of dysfunction where neither of you respects the other and the family suffers. If you're a woman watching this and feeling defensive, feeling attacked, feeling like this doesn't apply to you, that defensiveness is probably the signal that it does apply. The women who have this handled, who have accepted their role and are thriving in it, they don't get defensive when this structure is discussed. They recognize the truth of it because they're living the benefits of it. The women who get angry, who insist this is outdated or oppressive or wrong, they're usually the ones destroying their own families with this exact pattern. And their anger is just ego protection. It's the psychological defense mechanism that prevents them from examining their own behavior honestly. You have a choice. You can continue operating from ego, continue competing with your husband, continue refusing the structure that works because it doesn't make you feel important enough, and you can watch your marriage deteriorate, your family struggle, your husband withdraw, and your children suffer. Or you can choose humility, choose to trust that maybe, just maybe, the structure that's worked for thousands of years might work better than the egalitarian experiment that's producing the highest divorce rates in human history. Choose to support your husband's leadership instead of undermining it. Choose family success over personal validation. The choice is yours, but the outcomes are predictable. The ego-driven approach produces dysfunction, resentment, and eventual collapse. The humble approach produces thriving families, strong marriages, and children who grow up with healthy models of what partnership actually looks like. One path requires sacrificing your ego, the other path sacrifices your family. Choose wisely. Drop your experience in the comments. Are you a man dealing with a wife who can't accept this structure? Are you a woman who's made the choice to follow and discovered it actually works? Let's hear the real stories from people actually living this. And if this resonated, if this clarified something you've been experiencing but couldn't articulate, subscribe. Because this channel exists to speak the truth about relationship structures that modern society has decided are too controversial to acknowledge. The truth that traditional structures work better than modern experiments. The truth that families thrive when they're properly structured and fall apart when they're not. Someone needs to say it clearly, without apology, without softening it to avoid offense, and that's exactly what we do here. See you in the next one.